I really don't want to sound like a broken record. That's never my intention here on KCMO. But I got to tell you, as we start off a Wednesday morning, even I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed for our newspaper of record here in town, the Kansas City Star. And I put this up last night on Twitter. By the way, good morning. Got some rain coming through here in the next couple of hours from the west, so be alert for that. But last night at about 9 o'clock, I'm doing my show prep. A little late last night. Had some things to take care of. So I'm rolling through some of our local media outlets. And, you know, come across the Kansas City Star. I still use it as a resource. I just want to see what they're writing about, see what they're talking about, see what they're doing.
See what they're not talking about.
Yeah, very good point there, John. And last night, 13 stories atop the Kansas City Star's website. 13, 1-3. And nowhere did you see anything about the Fairway, Kansas police officer who was killed in the line of duty. That, of course, John just used for the top of the hour news. Jonah Oswald. Nothing. But don't worry, there was something on a Trump election attorney in California. That made the cut. Don't you worry. That was up there. But nothing. And I have the screenshot. It is up on my Twitter page at Pete Mundo. You can see it there. It's just, just when I think they can't embarrass this town anymore, they figure out a way to do it. Just when I think, there's a limit to how far they will apply their politics to their newspaper, they surpass it. It's truly amazing. So, meantime, you had all the other local TV stations doing very good work, leading with the fallen officer, Jonah Oswald, 29 years old. He gets shot in this crazy Sunday morning police chase that, was something that just spiraled out of control. It started off at a quick trip near 95th and I-35 in Lenexa. You had this man and this woman at about 7:30. Reports of a stolen Jeep Grand Cherokee at that quick trip. Officers investigating the theft. A woman driving the SUV rams a Lenexa police cruiser and then fled. Lenexa police chased the vehicle north on I-35. The vehicle crashed at Lamar Avenue. The man and the woman ran into a nearby quick trip. Officers from other agencies followed that pair into the quick trip. Shots were exchanged inside. One of the male suspect, was pronounced dead at the scene. Oswald was taken to the hospital where he died on Monday. So a fallen officer in Fairway, of all places, or from Fairway, of all places. Nobody ever would have predicted that when the weekend started in this town. But here we are. And for the Kansas City Star, it's not a top 13 story last night. Meantime, all the local TV stations, even Woke 41, to its credit, had some good tributes, led their newscasts with this, leads on the website. And here is KCTV5. Greg Payne was at the Fairway Police Department last night doing his report, and they did a very good job on their tribute.
Law enforcement officers from agencies across the KC Metro escorting the body of their fellow brother, Fairway officer Jonah Oswald.
First responders in general are special in our society because they do something no one else does. They raise their hand and swear an oath to run toward danger, and none of the rest of us do that.
Officer Oswald's life cut short at the age of 29 after being shot while pursuing two alleged car theft suspects at a Mission Quick Trip, now leaving behind a wife and two young children.
They may have had a phone call that morning or a kiss goodbye, not realizing it's their last kiss or the last phone call.
But today, the final goodbye, the last salute, as Officer Oswald taken to his final resting place. But while the streets weren't lined with crowds of community members, the love for Officer Oswald can truly be felt. What started out just after 10 p.m. last night as 3 flowers outside of the Fairway Police Department now sits a large memorial, a token of gratitude to say thank you one last time.
The police officers take care of us. I work around here, and I just feel like we need to take care of them.
It's not just the uniform. There's a person inside. There's a husband, a father, a son, a friend, a co-worker. I think we need to start thinking about police officers in a much different way. Not the uniform, but the person inside.
That is KCTV5's Greg Payne on the report. And if you recognize that voice, by the way, at the end, I'm 99.9% certain that was former Fox 4 reporter Shannon O'Brien, who just happened to be there dropping off flowers, commemorating Officer Oswald, and she gets interviewed by KCTV5. So credit to her. I mean, she was just there as a private citizen, but I was like, wait, I know that face and that voice as I'm watching the KCTV5 clip. Oh, yeah, that's Shannon O'Brien from Fox 4. So good to know that she was never woke when she was there at Fox 4. You know, unfortunately, they're few and far between these days, but good to know. And KCTV5's report I thought was important there because we talk about it on the show, but it's rare that other media will do it here in town. But it's pointing out the obvious, which is that the folks in law enforcement, whether it's in Fairway or Kansas City, Missouri, now we know where more crime is typically going to take place, but they do swear an oath to run towards danger. Nobody else is doing that in society. I mean, all right, the fire department is to some degree, but oftentimes it's the police department, and then there's quite a big gap. I mean, heck, on this show, all I'm running towards is maybe, Larry in Prairie Village trying to chew my head off, or Donnie Boy in Blue Springs. That's nothing compared to what the men and women in law enforcement are doing every single day in our communities. And you don't know when you're leaving the house and it's your last goodbye. It's your last kiss to your spouse. And that's something that every one of the men and women in law enforcement in this community and around the country have to have in the back of their mind every single day. They have to. Now, we did find out yesterday that charges have been filed against the Tennessee woman charged. She was charged in this case linked to the shootout that killed the Fairway officer. 32-year-old Andrea Renee Cothran of Godletsville, Tennessee, was charged on Tuesday morning. Johnson County District Court, 1 count each of aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer fleeing or attempting to elude a police officer, and theft. She also faces charges of reckless driving and misdemeanor. Now, her cohort, of course, died in the shooting on Sunday morning. So she is being charged. A big question that's getting asked, what were these two doing in the Kansas City area? We don't know. Steve Howe, prosecutor, said he could not get into that during a press conference yesterday. But we do know that this woman, Cothran, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of soliciting sexual exploitation of a minor back in 2016, according to the Tennessee Sex Offender Registry. So we're going to learn a lot more about who these 2 individuals were from Tennessee, why they were here in the Kansas City area. But I can't help but think about the fact that, they're outside of Nashville. That's where they came from. They had a criminal background. And it's sad to say, but nowadays, criminals across the country are getting slapped on the wrist. Committing crimes is not viewed at like it was 5 years ago. Never mind 20 years ago. How many bad actors are waking up this morning in the Kansas City area looking to commit crimes, whether it's people in Kansas City from Kansas City or people from Tennessee that make their way to Kansas City? It's a bad deal all around. And, when you think about that, it's not something that makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. 6:14 as we get it rolling on a Wednesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. Thanks for joining us as we kick off another day. Coming up, Mitch McConnell has some advice to the House. They want Mitch McConnell wants the House GOP to treat Joe Biden with kid gloves.
Boom, boom, boom.
And I can't quite figure out why. We'll give you the quote from Mitch McConnell, the turtle himself, coming up next. I get the good old boys club of politics is what it is. It's not going anywhere anytime soon, but Mitch McConnell needs to just stop. Mitch McConnell needs to keep his mouth shut on this one. Nobody wants to hear from Mitch McConnell when it comes to why I don't know if we should be impeaching Joe Biden, and that might not be the best thing for the country. Well, Mitch, Joe Biden hasn't really been a good thing for the country. And I'm not in favor of impeaching anybody just for the sake of impeachment. I would not stoop to the level of what Democrats did to Donald Trump on impeachment. I wouldn't. However, if there is overwhelming evidence that comes out via the House Oversight Committee and some of the other investigations that are going on into Joe Biden's family, and the case is clear as day that Joe Biden knew all too well about how his own family was benefiting from his position of power as vice president under Barack Obama. And then if there is proof, which we don't have yet, but if there is proof that Joe Biden took a dime from any of these operations, from any of these countries, any of these bad actors, he should be done. I mean, if Trump's going to get impeached for what Trump got impeached for, then Biden should be impeached a dozen times over. And by the way, yes, I agree when Mitch McConnell says to the New York Times, it wouldn't be a good thing for the country. Yeah, it wouldn't. But you know what? If Joe Biden has spent a career and a lifetime using his public position, funded by the taxpayer, as a politician to enrich himself and his family to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, then guess what? That gets you impeached. That's how it goes. McConnell told the New York Times in an interview published yesterday, I said 2 years ago, when we had not one but two impeachments, that once we go down this path, it incentivizes the other side to do the same thing. He said impeachment ought to be rare. This is not good for the country. I agree. I don't want every time there's a Democratic House with a Republican president, they're impeaching that guy. And then vice versa, Republicans are impeaching a Democratic president. And then, of course, the Senate will rarely, if ever, convict. I agree with that. I don't want that to be happening on a regular basis. And to me, this is not about defending Trump or got to get back at Biden because of what they did to Trump. It's simply saying, okay, if these are the rules that you want to play by, then, boy, there very well could be a lot more evidence to back up a Joe Biden impeachment than there would ever have been around a Donald Trump impeachment. And while I don't know what the future holds, if we end up in that place, I have no problem whatsoever with Kevin McCarthy and the House GOP impeaching Joe Biden. Because what that would ultimately do is it would have to bring attention to the corruption that has been out there with this Biden family. Now, at the very least, we know that much. At the very least, we know that Hunter, who has no discernible skills whatsoever, was basically the family bagman making millions of dollars off the last name Biden, off of daddy. That much we feel pretty darn good about right now, right? Joe's involvement, well, it's still a gray area, and I'm willing to wait for all the facts to come out and all the details to come out. I won't say he's guilty right now. I'm not going to do it. But certainly there's an enormous amount of smoke there. And if we get any further down this road and, that smoke turns into fire, well, by golly, Joe's done. And he should be done. And at that point, he should just resign. Bill O'Reilly has said on this show many times, and I was with Bill a couple of weeks ago now. We had a private visit, mano a mano, when I was visiting family back east, right on Bill's back porch overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. He is still convinced that Biden's not going to be the nominee. And part of the reason for that, as he told me privately, and he said as much on the show, he's like, Pete, the guy is going to be so caught up in this web, in this Hunter Biden web, that between that and his health, I don't know which one is ultimately going to do him in, but one of them, he's convinced before the election is going to do Joe Biden in. And that instead of going through any kind of impeachment or things like that, he will just go away. He will resign. And you'll never hear from Joe again. Now, you won't have to hear from Joe again because he'll be sitting, high on the hog and living the good life down at Rehoboth Beach in Delaware, where he's got a multi-million-dollar place. And for a guy that was making $170,000 a year for most of his life, even less in the early days, Boy, it's quite a spot he's got down there. Makes you wonder why. But Mitch McConnell is showing how out of touch he is with the moment. I agree. The most important thing right now is to win in 2024. That's number one. But I don't believe that if Joe Biden was involved with the scheme that we believe he was involved in, I don't believe at all, John, that this is going to hurt a Republican from winning if Joe Biden gets impeached if they've got the goods on the guy. If nothing else, it will bring attention to the story that the media clearly has no interest in covering.
That is true. I was thinking of Mitch, though, and it's kind of like, who among us hadn't taken a couple 100,000 now and again?
Well, you're reading the mind of the texters who are like, hey, Pete, McConnell doesn't want anyone looking into his family potentially. That's exactly. I agree.
Among thieves up there on the hill.
Well, I think you're on to something there for sure. Joe's certainly not the only one. He's just the most prominent one right now. I agree.
Well, he's the one denying it.
Yeah, well, also on the text line, Pete, I bet Mitch and Joe are basically doing the same thing. Text line, China Mitch has been selling out the U.S. for years. Gosh. John's always got the pulse of the people. He's always got the pulse of the texter.
I wish, like Animal House, when Mitch and Dianne Feinstein showed up to work, we could lead them into the living room at the front away from the other people.
Yeah. Oh, that would be outstanding. I would love to see that. But in the meantime, Mitch is like, just take it easy on Joe, He's one of the good old boys. Joe and I have been around forever. He's the only guy around here that makes me look young when I'm not having a brain freeze moment. Sheesh. Unbelievable. 913-408-7710 to join us on KCMO Talk Radio. Mitch McConnell. I can't imagine that many of you are going to be like, yeah, Mitch, Mitch is right. Please, try to convince me of that. I'm all ears at 913-408-7710. We got news coming up in a couple of minutes. So there was this big vote last night in Ohio tied to abortion. The details and what it means for us next. Well, Ohio had something very similar last night in a special election to what we dealt with here in Kansas about a year ago this time, tied to the Value Them Both Amendment. You remember that whole thing. It was tied to abortion, and, it went down in flames, unfortunately. And the movement on the pro-abortion side was incredibly powerful, beyond what any of us expected. Value Them Both lost by, 15 to 20 points. It was just an absolute blowout. So last night in Ohio, and there's a broader point here about what this means for 2024, but last night, something similar was on the ballot in a special election in Ohio. What was on the ballot in Ohio was known as Issue 1. The measure would have changed Ohio's referendum law, which would have basically required if there's something on the ballot in the state that through petition people are trying to get passed without the state legislature, it would have increased the vote from a 51% or 50 plus 1 simple majority to a 60% majority to get that passed. So let's just say they wanted to legalize marijuana in the state of Ohio. Well, if they got that on the ballot through a referendum, right now they need 50 plus 1. The push for a yes vote, known as Issue 1, was to get it up to 60% for it to pass. So that was generally backed, that movement was generally backed by Republicans in Ohio who were of the opinion that a lot of out-of-state money could come into Ohio and get things on the ballot that would not normally pass a state legislature, and they were trying to make it more difficult for those things to pass on the ballot. That was the purpose. That's what a yes on this Issue 1 in Ohio would have done. Well, no votes came out in force. It was not an abortion vote per se, but the no side used the abortion issue to effectively win last night because they want to get some referendum on the ballot this November on the abortion issue that either makes abortion easier to access or whatever in Ohio. And the abortion advocates got their people out, dumped a ton of money in on the no side, and the no side won last night. So it's similar to what happened here in Kansas last year, in that when you get the no side revved up, when you get the abortion folks revved up on one side of an issue, even if it's really not about at its very core abortion, and Value Them Both was not at its very core about abortion, but they made it about that. And this certainly in Ohio was not in any way about abortion, but once again, they tied it to that issue. The no side in Ohio won by 14 points last night, 57-43. It wasn't close. So Democrats realize that this issue in particular is one that solidifies their base and gets their people out to vote. Now, I think that's pretty sick that something like abortion and fears around abortion is what would get people off the couch to vote. The vast majority of people are never going to get an abortion. They shouldn't necessarily be voting based on the issue of abortion as a single issue voter. But there's, unfortunately, a lot of those people out there. And the Democratic Party has figured out that issue galvanizes their people more so than any other. That issue in particular gets people revved up on that side more than any other. And we saw it in Kansas last year. We saw it in Ohio last night, even though, of course, abortion was even less on the ballot than it was with Value Them Both in Kansas last year. That one was much easier to tie to the issue of abortion than this one in Ohio. This was just about, hey, if we're going to get something on the ballot through referendum, to get it to pass, it can't be 50+1. It's got to be 60%. And somehow the abortion advocates made it about their issue, and now because they won, they want to get some abortion referendum on their ballot in November and try to get 50+1 and get that vote done. That's what they're hoping to do now. So they tied it to this issue, despite the fact that the question on the ballot had nothing to do with that issue. So what do you do? If you're Republicans in any of this going forward, what do you do? Because this issue in particular is one that if it's on the ballot, you're probably going to lose. I think it's a sad state of affairs in the country that that's the case. But if that's the case, what do you do? How do you respond? I'm not saying you forget about the issue. I'm not saying you shouldn't be a pro-life legislator if you are one. Or a governor. I'm not suggesting any of that. But I'm simply pointing out that make sure this issue resides exclusively at the state level, in the legislatures, and you try to find the best route possible to preserve life while also realizing it's probably a political loser for you until the tide starts to turn. Until the tide of common sense and decency and life start to turn around, which I don't know when that happens, but at some point it might, it doesn't do Republicans any good to make it a staple issue in any kind of a general election. I mean, you could apply it to 2024. DeSantis has been more outspoken about the pro-life issue than Trump has, and Trump's creaming him in the polls. I don't think that's why. I'm not saying that's why. But DeSantis is not getting the traction to the right of Trump that he thought he was going to get on the culture war stuff and then also, on some of the social issues. It's just not working for him. Trump was a pro-life president. I mean, look what he did on the Supreme Court appointments. However, it was never a staple of who Donald Trump was or Donald Trump is as a politician. It's something he did, and that's where you got to give Trump an enormous amount of credit in terms of having the pulse of the moment. It was never something that Donald Trump made a core tenet of his campaign, especially in the general. But then when he got to office, yes, he did govern as a pro-life guy. But no one's ever going to think of Donald Trump and think of the top three issues and think of him being pro-life. They're just not. You're going to think about foreign policy. You're going to think about the economy. But you're going to think about the wall. You're not going to think about the issue of abortion. And that's where there certainly have been missteps by Trump, politically speaking. But that is one that he's been right about. He's been right to be a pro-life politician while not making it a staple of his campaign. Because there's nothing to me, as far as I can tell, whether it's in Ohio, which is now a red state, or Kansas, which, yes, can be wishy-washy, but still, when it comes to, especially federal elections, is generally a red state, there's nothing to suggest that the issue is a winner when in red states, anytime abortion appears to be on the ballot, it gets absolutely crushed. And that's what you saw in Ohio last night. You saw it in Kansas a year ago. And you're going to continue to see it in other elections around the country over the next 15 months, leading right up to 2024. 6:43. It is good to be back on a Wednesday morning on KCMO. We've got that rain coming in from the west. Some of you probably driving through it right now as you hit the roads and head out to the office. Appreciate you joining us. We got a busy morning ahead. But before we get to anything else on the news, politics side, I got to ask Mark about something we were talking about yesterday. The cost of kids' back-to-school items are going up with inflation. Mark did his back-to-school shopping. I don't want to know how much it cost him. He's going to tell us, though. I asked him during the break. I said, Mark, how much did it cost? He said, I want to forget. I said, okay, don't give me the number. I don't want the number. But these are the kinds of things that people are thinking about right now. Not Trump being indicted, right? They're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about, oh, boy, poor Ukraine. At least not normal people. They're thinking about, geez, my school supplies were just costing me an arm and a leg. Mark will give us the rundown on that. Coming up next, Pete Mundo on KCMO. Got one of those summer thunderstorms blowing through the metro on a Wednesday morning, 7:05. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. As you heard from Wendy there, slick roads, especially on the Kansas side as we get it going this morning. But that storm is going to be moving across the entire metro throughout morning drive. So take it easy, give yourself some extra time, and just be tuned in to us here on KCMO. Oh, man, it keeps getting worse. Or I should say it's not getting better. We've got the new numbers here on a Wednesday morning on Anheuser-Busch's Bud Light brand. And sales plunged 25.9% for the week ending July 29th. Woo! Boy, that's a darn shame, isn't it? There is no end in sight to this. This has been such an effective boycott. And at this point, it may no longer be a boycott. It might be like people boycotted for 2 months, and now they're just like, wait, that beer kind of sucks anyway. That might be what's going on here, and that's why Bud Light may never see a return to their old sales numbers, John.
Yeah, I know it's likened to a boycott, and I think the left thinks that the right gets together and we have meetings and keep minutes, and there's a sergeant of arms to organize this boycott. No, it's a collection of individuals thinking for themselves. You and I don't get together and talk about, hey, don't buy any Bud Light this weekend, all right, buddy?
Yeah.
Bump knuckles on the way out Friday. Not like that. These are people thinking for themselves, and collectively, there's a lot of power in that.
There is. Well, I'm sure that there are some in this audience who think that I, hold it over you guys. If I hear about you buying Bud Light, you're fired on Monday. No, that's not happening here on KCMO, I promise you. And it's always tough when you've been boycotting something before it was cool to boycott it.
Well, that's been my experience, yeah.
Yeah.
I hate it when I'm already participating.
The only thing that it will apply to me with is at Arrowhead Stadium. That's where I would buy Bud products. I would never buy it and bring it home, but I would buy Bud products at Arrowhead because that's the easiest thing to buy. That's where my boycott's going to begin. My boycott begins September 7th against the Lions. That's when my boycott starts. Or whatever games I'm able to get to this year. That's when the boycott starts for me when it comes to Bud Light. So I'm going to be 6 months behind the Bud Light boycott. But don't worry, I'm going to come in strong September 7th. That's when it begins. But they are seeing numbers that continue to trend down 25 to 30% decreases. Since, of course, April 1st, that's when it all began with the Dylan Mulvaney ad campaign that they did, putting his face on a can, a popular transgender influencer. And just to reiterate the point, it's not about being anti-trans. It's not about being anti-Dylan Mulvaney. Dylan Mulvaney was caught between traditional America and corporate America where traditional America was sick and tired of being told by corporate America what social issues they should care about. Traditional America wants corporate America to sell the stupid products they make and the services they sell to every single American, right, left, and in the middle. And for the better part of, several years now, especially the last couple, for some reason, whether it's tied to ESG scores or just the woke nature of the people in charge of these companies in New York and LA, they've continued to get more political. And Bud Light was an easy way for Americans to boycott an all-time popular brand that catered to many right here in Kansas City and across middle America. And Dylan Mulvaney was caught in between. It's not some hatred for Dylan Mulvaney, who's prancing around pretending to be a girl. That's not what it's about. It's about giving a double middle finger to corporate America from traditional America in the most effective boycott we've seen. And I think now we're at the point where many former Bud Light drinkers are realizing, you know what? A lot of this stuff's pretty similar, or maybe they're now in the craft beer, right? Maybe they're into something else.
It's like you talk about as you get older, you maybe become more conservative. The next step beyond that is becoming a beer snob. So, right?
Says the beer snob.
Absolutely. So they don't have my brand, Dr. Pepper. Yeah. I don't trade down.
No. John does not trade down when it comes to
nothing.
his drinks. So Modelo is now number one and has been for the last several weeks. Bud Light, according to the most recent numbers, finds itself off 25.9%. And what has this resulted in, by the way? A $400 million hit since the backlash began in its latest quarterly earnings released last week. And now Anheuser-Busch is selling 8 beer and beverage brands to a cannabis company out of Canada. And that includes several big names. I didn't even know they had these beers. Shock Top is owned by Anheuser-Busch. They're the ones with the little orange label on them. Blue Point, Breckenridge Brewery, Red Hook Brewery, Highball Energy, and others will be sold to Tilray Brands out of Canada, cannabis company, expected to be completed later this year. Now, we don't know if this is a direct result of the Bud Light fallout, to be completely fair, but the timing certainly seems incredibly suspicious. The Wall Street Journal spoke to Andy Thomas, president of the high-end business unit at Anheuser-Busch, who said Tilray expressed interest earlier this year in buying these brands. But here now you have Anheuser-Busch selling some pretty big-name brands after revenues are off $400 million with Bud Light because of the mistake that they made earlier this year with Dylan Mulvaney.
I like the hypocrisy from the left. Like, see, your boycott's putting people out of work. They only hoped that they could have inflicted this damage on Hobby Lobby or Chick-fil-A. They couldn't. So once again, the boo-hoo.
That is an outstanding point. If they could put Chick-fil-A out of business tomorrow, if they could put every
Hobby
Lobby, if they could take every mom and pop cake maker and baker who, wouldn't want to bake a cake for whatever religious reasons, if they could put every mom and pop baker out of business that disagrees with their view of the world, they would have done it yesterday.
Absolutely.
Docs.
Yes.
They would have dragged their name through the mud if they could. They would have had them tarred and feathered. But now, look at you guys. You're putting Anheuser-Busch employees on the streets. Well, by the way, most of the employees, as we told you a couple of weeks back, that did lose their jobs are on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. They're not distributors in St. Louis. They're marketing people and advertising folks on Fifth Avenue in New York City, who, by the way, will brush up their LinkedIn pages, will brag about how they got the Mulvaney thing done with Bud Light, and will be hired by some other woke corporation, and they'll try to destroy that one too. They'll be fine. So, yeah, the boo-hoo, you guys are causing jobs. Stop. You guys have stuck 2 middle fingers in the face of traditional America for several years. And finally, there's been an effective pushback. Finally, there's been an effective pushback. And you are not going to make me feel bad about that for a second. 913-408-7710, 713 on a dark, rainy, weird Wednesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. Meantime, speaking of beer, a couple of towns in the metro are already mourning the loss of the Royals. We'll tell you who those towns are and why next on KCMO. Sober analysis, as always, by Bill O'Reilly. Welcome in on a rainy Wednesday morning. Thanks for being here on KCMO. Independence is fearing losing business when the Royals move out of the Truman Sports Complex to downtown KC or Clay County. That's the headline from Woke 41 Action News late last night. Says here the Royals are about to make a big decision regarding where they're going to take the team. People like Randy Townsend, even though he hasn't been to a game in a while, he's found a way to cheer on his team, bellied up at the bar. He says, I'm 74, I'm lucky to get out the front door. It's our team, Kansas City. He's a 74-year-old loyal Royals fan, a proud Independence native. And it's that pride he takes in his city that doesn't want the stadium to move anywhere. Goes on the note here in this article, Independence feels the trickle effect. It's not just the shops, the restaurants, the hotels. The city is only about 15 minutes away from the Truman Sports Complex, making it a lot easier for people to get in and out. The city's next challenge is learning to grow without the team. So I get it. I mean, it's one of the reasons, by the way, that when owners of sports teams say that their investments and moving their stadiums around leads to growth, let's say downtown or in Clay County, that's true. But to the point of this article from Woke 41, it hurts the Independence part, right? It hurts Independence. It can hurt areas around the stadium. So if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, is that really good for the region at large? It's a great point on the economics of stadiums that rarely live up to the promises that owners make when they fleece the taxpayer. That is a very fair point, and that applies to almost every stadium project in the country.
Touche, and yet being a lifelong resident in the ballpark opening up there in, 73, 72, something like that, 73, Independence has had plenty of time.
Well,
I'm
yes.
being facetious, but what we've got is a Denny's, a Taco Bell, and a gas station, and a hotel they can't keep open.
Well, yes.
Right.
Now, is that the hotel you met Ray Liotta at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right?
I'll just make
sure. I can't
sure.
even go visit my memories anymore because it's closed up, I think, right now. Yeah. Which I don't understand, but I think it's the non-game crowd that comes in when you don't have games and home stands that, I don't know, they had a water park there for a while, but I don't know what happened to it. Well, not paying attention. Point being that there's been plenty of time to develop around the ballpark, so the impact is somewhat less than it might have been.
Correct. They have not done themselves any favors. That's for darn sure. On building
I will say
up.
It's landlocked, but this city was dug out of the cliffs from the river south from the beginning, so I think we could have overcome some of the topography and created some areas and places.
Well, when you look at Independence and you realize, okay, they may hurt by losing the Royals to either North KC or downtown, that's true. That's a fair concern for Independence. But if you're John Sherman, with all due respect to Independence, you're in the business of trying to help the Royals' bottom line. You're in the business of trying to figure out how do we get more revenues to this team to then hopefully reinvest it in the team on the field. And while that may end up hurting Independence, if it's better for the team, you got to do what's in the best interest of your business if you're John Sherman. So I will feel bad for parts of Independence and for any businesses in Independence that may ultimately see a downturn when the Royals leave the Truman Sports Complex. But that's not the job of the Royals to prop up Independence businesses, in all fairness.
Absolutely. And this, too, should pass if the leadership of Independence, and if the Chiefs are the sole tenant of the sports complex and have some room where we might not have the Kauffman Stadium anymore and there's room to develop, then it's behooves Independence to get involved early.
Yes. And if the Chiefs at Arrowhead are going to be getting more concerts, Independence can be benefiting off of that.
Mm-hmm. We'll have probably more things out there because you won't have to work around Royals dates and parking, et cetera.
Correct. You might have now a situation where you've got, maybe a sports book if Missouri gets its act together at some point and actually passes sports betting. Maybe you got some big sports book with restaurants and bars and things like that out there that independents can latch onto. There will be opportunities for independents.
And you can join the streetcar line.
Yeah, no, don't give them any ideas. Don't give these losers and goobers any ideas with that, John,
get a
please.
bike lane out to the stadium.
No. Yeah, Eric Bunch will be out there with his helmet and knee pads on, the only guy in the bike lane, going from KC Mo out to the stadium. Don't give them any ideas. I know we say it tongue-in-cheek, but these people are going to be like, oh, that's not a bad call. That's not a bad idea. So you just got to pump the brakes on this whole thing. Meantime, speaking of baseball, saw this story. The average cost to attend a major league game. What'd you guess the average cost is to attend a major league game for a family of 4? Tickets all in. Give me a guess there, fellas. Just a number.
$220.
$220. All right, that's a good guess. What
Are
do you
we
got?
doing concessions on there? I've
Yes,
thrown a few concessions.
yes.
$220.
Parking, tickets, concessions.
Didn't do parking.
$280.
$280. Okay. Well, the number here, which is surprisingly low to me, and I don't believe it for a second, $140. There's no way you're taking a family of 4 to a game for $140. Tickets, parking, concessions.
I can't see that.
No, there's no way. Combination of tickets, parking, 4 hot dogs, 2 beers, and 2 sodas. That's what they average this off of in major league stadiums around the country. I went with Claire to a game last week. We went to the Mets game on Thursday, right? And 2 tickets, we got them day before secondary market, came out to $25 each. $50 right there. 20 for parking. We're at 70. The damn Dippin' Dots were $10.50 in the little cup, right?
Oh, those were the good ones then, the $10 ones.
Yes, we got the high-end Dippin' Dots. $10.50 there. I'm up to
Yeah.
$80. And then you toss in chicken fingers and a couple water bottles, and we're up to another $25, so $105 all in. And that's just 2 of us. That's just 2 of us.
Yeah, I
the
don't
Royals.
think what GA is right now, but I'm not sure that figure fits even with 4 GA seats.
This is per Money Geek. They analyzed ticket options for the rest of the 2023 season across Major League Baseball, calculated it for all 30 teams, and it came out to $140. The most expensive, the Dodgers at $219. The cheapest, the Miami Marlins. The Royals were 26th out of 30 at $106 for a family of 4. I don't know how you get the number. I was there with a 4-year-old. I was at $110. I suppose I'm going to skip the Dippin' Dots, and then I'm down to $99.50. But sheesh, I don't.
They don't tell you they went on dollar hot dog night or anything, right?
Yeah, no,
Maybe something like that.
I was blown away by these numbers. I'm like, that's not my lived experience. The hot phrase, right?
That's not your truth.
That's not my truth. The phrase the left likes to use. Speaking of truth, if only we could get a little bit of truth from the Kansas City Star on the biggest story of the week. Wish that was possible. We'll get to it next. It is unbelievable to think that, with the top story this week, of course, being a fallen Fairway police officer. The Kansas City Star last night at about 9 o'clock, as I'm doing research for the show this morning, didn't have anything in the top dozen stories in the homepage about this. Not one whatsoever about Jonah Oswald, who died in the line of duty on Sunday morning at a Quick Trip in Mission. And I'm going through all the local news outlets and the TV stations. They had it covered top to bottom. They led with the story. Kansas City Star, wasn't worthy of a top 12 story. I'm not saying it had to be the lead, although it should have been the lead. It was not a top 12 story on the Kansas City Star website. I understand they're not going to write an editorial about Back in the Blue. I understand they're not going to write an editorial about how soft on crime prosecutors around the country are letting criminals run wild. I know that's not happening. I'm not expecting it to. But the biggest news story of the week is a 29-year-old father of 2, husband and father of 2 young children, dying in the line of duty after a shootout at a Quick Trip in Mission. And they're nowhere to be found last night, 9 p.m., not a single story. And meantime, all the TV stations, even Woke 41 News, was leading with this story last night.
Yeah, and the anatomy of the story, it happened Sunday morning, so it's on the Sunday evening news
Yes.
and television.
Mhm.
Monday morning on their websites, then it's the officers in critical condition. And he later passes in the day, so that becomes yesterday's news.
Correct.
You know, and also yesterday, I saw most of the stations were on the procession.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that, there became a new chapter about every 12 to 18 hours
Correct.
in this whole story.
Exactly. We didn't know that this Officer Oswald had died until Monday night. And then that becomes the news cycle yesterday. And then the procession and everything else that was involved yesterday. You had folks in Fairway bringing flowers to the police department headquarters, and you had reaction from area police departments. None of that made the Kansas City Star website last night. None of it.
Multiple opportunities to jump in.
Correct. And they didn't take any of them. Not a single one.
Seems intentional, maybe.
Well, sheesh, you don't say. Huh. It's almost like if, God forbid, there's a story that would make a decent person sympathetic to law enforcement. Yeah, we're not going to run that. But don't worry, this morning, and, in case you're wondering, maybe they got it up by this morning. Nope, it's not up this morning either on the Star's website. The lead story is Prairie Village residents mad over housing, try to remake council. Do they have a chance? They love that story. Oh, there is a law enforcement story here. Kansas officer convicted of 12 felonies, including rape, loses police license. That one is a top 12 story on the Star homepage. A police officer in Hutchinson. They got that story out of Hutchinson as a top 12 story on the Star's pathetic homepage. But not a single mention, top 12 stories on the homepage about Officer Oswald. Right here in Fairway. But I'm glad they got the guy in Hutchinson. Not saying that's not a story, but goodness gracious, get your damn priorities in order. At the Kansas City Star, gosh.
I'm getting pissed now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think they do.
Yeah, well, true. Now, what was, as I'm going through the website last night, what was a very important story? What was a headline story? Well, speaking of editorials, this is the kind of stuff that they want to make sure you're reading. They don't care about some, law enforcement officer who died. It's just writing mission. That's not worthy of your time. But don't worry. They're going to tell you about cops in Hutchinson. And then also, they got to write about Donald Trump. I mean, geez, they're due. You got to have at least a couple articles a week in the editorial board about Donald Trump. Here's the headline from Hack Henenberger. If we return Trump to power, this is going to be no different from Putin's Russia.
She's a real beauty.
Yeah.
So now when I go to my ATM, I'm going to have to push one for English and two for Russian?
Yep. That's how it's going to be. No, actually, it's one for Russian, two for English.
Yeah, well, that'd be like,
Because Trump is such a Putin stooge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but I just want to make sure, you got
it's
the
a fantasy. It's fiction.
Exactly. Exactly right. It is fiction. And it starts off with fiction, by the way. Here's how Henenberger starts the piece in the Star. The other day, a Kansas Citian who was born in Iran and has been a U.S. citizen for decades told me how upset he is about our former and, God forbid, future president's gangster threat. That, quote, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. Now, Trump put that up in a Truth Social post over the weekend. And in typical Trump fashion, he's not very nuanced in how he says anything. Never has been, never will be. People don't usually change who they are at like 78 years old.
Not much.
But clearly that quote from Trump on Truth Social, it got spun. You want to talk about a fantasy, a fiction fantasy, that got spun into meaning so many different things to so many different people. What he means is basically, hey, if I get back in power, just like the current administration is using the Department of Justice to go after me politically, clear as day, that's what happens. You can hate Trump, but you clearly see a weaponized DOJ used by Joe Biden to go after Donald Trump. That is almost indisputable at this point, what's going on. There is a very strong case that that's exactly what is happening here. So Trump says on Truth Social, hey, if you go after me, I'm coming after you. And now you have Henenberger at the Star, I think, probably making up this story about a Kansas Citian born in Iran came up to me with tears streaming down his face. I'm making that part up. And told me how upset
he was. That was good, though. I thought it was in there. Yeah. I didn't doubt.
Now, of course, at the end of the article, there's this editor's note. The Iranian individual mentioned in this story is not named. We have decided to grant his anonymity out of concern for his safety. As what? As if Trump supporters are reading the Star editorial board, which nobody's doing outside of me for, bleeps and giggles. And they're going to find this Iranian man and say, how dare you say that about Donald Trump in that paragraph of the editorial board's article from last week? What fantasy world are they living in with this stuff? Like, it's hysterical, but it's also just makes you want to rip your hair out.
Yeah, when they insult your intelligence, we have the left who condones mostly peaceful protests that clearly show fires burning and people swinging, but are afraid of words.
Yeah.
That's a threat? No, that's called politics, basically, in a nutshell.
It is, and it's called, have you followed Donald Trump for 8 years? It's mostly just white noise at this point. I mean, that's what Trump says so much stuff, and half the stuff contradicts what he said a week ago. You can't keep track of any of it.
White noise is an electronic term for a sound that is basically shh. That would be white noise, in case anybody's wondering about your reference.
Fair enough. As someone with 2 little kids that has sound machines all over the house, I've gotten used to a lot of white noise. The article goes on the note, this Iranian man says to Henneberger, what are we going to do about Trump? What I answered is not important, but what he said then really is. I wasn't going to take notes, so I'm not going to put this in quotes, but it's pretty close. We have to stop him, no matter what it costs us, or we're going to lose everything, said my friend, who I'm not naming out of concern for his safety. We're going to lose our democracy. Americans have had it so good for so long. They have no idea what that means, and I hope they never find out. But if we don't wake up, this is going to be no different from Putin's Russia. You see that, right? Henneberger goes on the right. Unfortunately, yes. If you have read Donald Trump's latest indictment, you know that according to his own team, he was willing to use force to stay in power. There's a word for that, and it certainly is not conservative.
Like on a scale of 1 to 10, I wonder where the Ayatollah's Iran compares to Putin's Russia and Trump's America. 1 through 3 there.
Oh, my goodness. This is the stuff. Like, by the way, the whole thing about how the world's going to end if Trump becomes president, we just did it for 4 years, and the world didn't end. In fact, it was a hell of a lot safer. The economy was a lot better, and when it came to the border, we knew at least a little more who was coming in and out of the country.
He forgot to start the nuclear war with North Korea.
Yeah, that's right.
He went up there and actually visited. I don't know, why didn't he start the war then?
He's going to wait till his second term after he lost once to Joe Biden. Like,
not only was there not a war, he visited.
Well, yeah, exactly right.
As close as you can do.
Mm-hmm. That's where you wonder, like, these fantasies. The fantasies on both sides of the aisle, by the way, on the extreme ends, are so ridiculous at this point. I saw Carrie Lake doing something about how Trump needs to be reinstalled as president last week, the former GOP Arizona gubernatorial candidate. And I'm like, what planet is she living on? And then you got this stuff in the Kansas City Star that becomes much more mainstream media about how if Trump gets back in the White House, it's going to be like Putin's Russia. No, most people just want to go back to like 2019 prices, 2019
gas.
economy. Yeah, $3 gas. I mean, that's kind of all we're looking for here. That's it. Maybe stopping the flow of the millions of people who we don't know who are coming across the border the last 2.5, 3 years. That's kind of it. This isn't all that complex. But my goodness, this is the kind of stuff, instead of at the Kansas City Star, just having a news story on a fairway cop getting killed. Instead, you've got an editorial board pushing this nonsense while the news of the day gets lost in the shuffle. It's really sad and pathetic. And that's saying something considering the standards I have when it comes to that newspaper. 913-408-7710. 745 on a rainy Wednesday morning across Kansas City. Appreciate you being here as we approach the 8 o'clock hour. Coming up, there's some concern that Kansas City may lose one of its premier events. I have no concern about that whatsoever. I'll tell you what the event is and why next. I am in no way concerned. I don't know. I've seen this conversation over the last 5 days or so. But I'm in no way concerned, and I don't think you should be either, about the Big 12 tournament going anywhere, leaving Kansas City anytime soon. I will ask Quentin Lucas about this tomorrow morning when he comes on the show at 7:30. But ever since the Big 12 last week added Arizona, Utah, Arizona State, a week after adding Colorado, you're now 16 teams. I've seen people tweeting about this in Kansas City. They're going to take the Big 12 tournament out of here. They're going to go to Phoenix. They're going to go to Vegas. They're going to leave Kansas City. It's not going to happen. I actually just happened to be on the phone yesterday with somebody who was within the Big 12 conference, and they reiterated to me that Brett Yormark, the commissioner, loves Kansas City. Now, he's a New York City guy. He's not a Midwest guy, but he loves Kansas City. And what he told me is that Kansas City embraces this tournament unlike anything he had ever seen and beyond what he expected on his first year on the job. Meantime, if you go to Phoenix, you go to Vegas, you're one of a million things going on.
Comic-Con, tattoo conventions.
Yeah, the list goes on, you know. Last year, there were 3 conference tournaments in Las Vegas: Pac-12, Mountain West, and the WAC. They all did conference tournaments in Vegas the same week. When you land at the Vegas airport, you're like, all right, there's casinos, there's shows, there's 3 conference tournaments. What am I doing? You come to Kansas City that second week of March, and you know what's going on in this town, right? You know what's going to be the center of attention. It's going to be the Big 12 basketball tournament. That's how it goes. So, and this person at the Big 12 yesterday specifically told me, he's like, we're not going anywhere. He said, we might do some Olympic sports stuff out west, whether it's Vegas or Arizona, but the Big 12 tournament is not moving. Kansas City embraced us beyond what we expected. This was a guy who's only been on the job for a few months, but is tied into what's happening there at the Big 12. And he said, Kansas City has nothing to worry about. Nothing whatsoever.
And it's even more centralized now. When
That's
you
a
got
good
West
point.
Virginia, Arizona, Kansas City's right in the middle.
Yeah, that's true. You know,
And it's going to be lit with all those good teams coming in here.
yeah.
This is absolutely lit. This is lit.
That's exactly right. It is.
Yeah, I was going to echo what Mark said, but then I realized most of the people in the country have no idea where we are, right? So you go down past Wyatt Earp's place, take a left at Dorothy's and Annie M's. You know, it's like if more people realize, or if we got out there and hustled a little more, that we're right in the middle, 3
Yes.
hours either way.
That is
This
spot
should
on.
be the place. So, like you say, it takes over the city.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you're going to move the Indy 500 out of Indianapolis.
No.
right?
No.
And so this city has a chance to make that same, and they do make that same impression. You own the city when you come that week.
You own it, and you own it in a good way. It's not like, well, it's a podunk town, there's nothing to do. No, you get the big city, and you get to own the big city for a week. You're never going to own Dallas. No, it's just not. Dallas is too big. It's too spread out. There's too much going on. You own Kansas City and downtown Kansas City for a week. And next year it's going to be 2 weeks, by the way, because the women are playing at T-Mobile the week before instead of playing over at Municipal, which I don't like, but that's a separate conversation.
And with more teams, we're going to need more hotels downtown.
Oh, gosh. Don't get the... Don't.
It's the Big 12 plus how many now?
You are giving all these developers and all these government entities bad
Got a
ideas.
little place over in the East Village for you.
Right next to the homeless shelters, there's some great spots for you to develop a couple of new hotels. Don't give them any ideas, John. You know, city's going to be giving out taxpayer dollars left and right if you keep giving up these ideas for them. But no, yeah. Oh, Utah's in. That means we need a new hotel. That's right. We got to spruce up the Marriott there downtown. Give it a couple extra floors. No, but the Big 12's not going anywhere. It's not. I promise you that. There should be no concerns there from anybody. Kansas City can lose. They might lose the Royals. They can screw up a lot of things. And I promise you they have and they will continue to screw up a lot of things with this city council, the super progressive city council taking over. They won't screw. Well, I shouldn't say that. Easy does it. I don't even think they will screw this up. I don't think they will. See, because the Royals and entities like that, they have long-term interest because they're going to live it every day. The Big 12 will come in here for a week or two, and we'll get the red carpet rolled out, and we'll be able to block off all the bad things happening, and they'll live in their little bubble. They'll own it, and they will embrace it. The Royals, you got to live here, right? You got to experience it 365 days a year. You understand that there are concerns going to the East Village right now. The Big 12, you know what? For a week or two, they'll protect them from all the nonsense. So I don't even think they can screw it up. I don't think the people in charge right now can screw this up. But hold my beer. They'll find out the way to do it. 7:57. Welcome in on a rainy. I feel like we've had a lot of these kind of mornings the last couple of weeks where it's raining, it's dark, it's sheesh. But then the sun will pop out at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Sheesh. So when you think of the wonders of the world, what comes to mind for you? If we were to have a conversation of the wonders of the world, what tops that list? Well, if you ask the President of the United States, he was apparently at one of them yesterday, except he wasn't. He thought he was at one of the wonders of the world, but he wasn't. We'll tell you what that location was, and we've got the audio next.